Hey Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my combination reaction video to our win against the Panthers and prediction video for Monday night's game against the Redskins. I didn't get a chance to put a reaction video up to the Panthers game. We were traveling last weekend and didn't get home till Tuesday evening, so just didn't get a chance to do it, so I just figured I'd roll it in with this one. But what a win that was. It was a great win, obviously. And then everything that transpired in the weekend following with Aaron Rodgers' injury really makes this season a lot more interesting as far as the Eagles are concerned and their prospects of where they could go. I am just over the moon right now. This team is a legitimate NFC contender. I thought even before the Rodgers injury, and now that Aaron Rodgers has been hurt, you've got to think that the Eagles are right now the favorites to win the NFC, which the beginning of the season, I thought making the playoffs would be an accomplishment, but this team has taken huge leaps forward, more than I could have even predicted. And I know a lot of people are talking about the difference between, last year we got off to the great start and it sort of ended up falling apart. As a matter of fact, after 6 games, this year we're 5-1. Last year, after 6 games, we were 4-2. But it just feels a lot different. And I think a lot of that has to do with the maturation of Carson Wentz and where he's come as a quarterback. It also has to do with some of the improvements they've made on defense and just some of the overall better play on the defensive side of the football. So last Thursday night's win obviously was so huge. It really, I think, was a statement win, as people are saying, and it really showed that this team can beat good teams on the road. The knock, of course, against the Eagles was up to this point they really hadn't beaten anyone except for the Redskins, really. But, when you go in and you beat a team that's first place in their division, is one of the only other one-loss teams in the conference, and you go into their house and you beat them, I think that says a lot, and especially when you do it on a short week. It really, I think, ended up sending a message that the Eagles are for real this year, and I think if they continue to play at the level that they're playing at, there's really no limit on where this team could go this year. But let's go ahead and take a look at studs and duds from Week 6, and I'll go ahead and start with the duds since we won the game. And really there's only 2 duds I can think of in this game. Number 2 is going to be Kenjon Barner, and that has to do mostly with the muff punt and the fact that, I know that, he was sort of hit on the play, but still, you've got to make sure you come up with that. That could have been a huge momentum shift. Fortunately, Patrick Robinson was there to fall on the ball, and it really didn't shake things up that much, but it really could have been a horrible and disastrous play. When you look at Kenjon Barner's production in the rest of the offense too, it really, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. So overall, I just don't think that he had a very good game. But my number 1 dud, is this going to be any surprise with the way this game went, is got to be the guys in the stripes. And I am not one to complain about refs. If the Eagles had lost this game, the referees would have made my duds list, but they would not have been number 1. The only reason I'm putting them number 1 is because the Eagles still won the game. But there's one stat that all you need to know about this game in terms of the referees: 126-1. The penalty yardage was absolutely ridiculous. And there were calls that they could have made against the Panthers. And I know the NFL came out this week and said that there was no evidence of bias. Granted, okay, maybe there's no evidence of bias, but you can't say that the calls were fair in terms of, what was called against us and what was not called against them. I mean, really, are you going to tell me that this is not a holding call? Or how about this? I mean, those are clear examples of holding. That's textbook holding. And those are obviously screenshots taken directly from the game. And, it's just sort of ridiculous that they're going to say that that was a fairly officiated game when you had plays like that. I mean, Cam Newton dropped back to pass over 50 times in that game, and you're not going to call one holding penalty against their offensive line. It was clear that this was not an evenly officiated game. And like I said, this is also an example, frankly, of people that say refs cost us the game. No, you should be able to still, if you're good enough, you should be able to still win in spite of the refs. And that's what happened here. The Eagles won in spite of the refs, and the Eagles are good enough. And that tells me a lot, that they're good enough to go on the road, beat a playoff caliber team when the refs are that stacked against you. So that really, I think, says a lot about how well this team is playing right now. So we'll go ahead, flip it on the other side. Let's take a look at the studs for the week. And I came up with 6 solid studs for this week. Number 6 is going to be Carson Wentz. He didn't have a completely mistake-free game. He fumbled on the very first possession, which really could have put us in a bad situation. But the Eagles, were able to respond there. But still, he played for the most part a pretty good game. He did not make any big mistakes. Even the fumble really wasn't his fault. But he really, I think, played a solid game overall. The other reason he's a little lower on this list is, not the last possession we had when we just ran the clock out, but the one right before that where we could have gotten a first down and run the clock out. There was a play, he threw the ball to Zach Ertz where Nelson Agholor was wide open, and it was clear that they could have just gone to Agholor and probably gotten the first down. There was no defensive back that was anywhere close to him on the line of scrimmage. And Carson Wentz needs to see that. He really needs to see that, complete that pass, and get that first down. But there really are some things that we can really like about the way Carson Wentz is playing this year. He's becoming sort of like Donovan was when he was really good. When Donovan was really good, he was throwing the ball all around, and he would be distributing it to a lot of different receivers. And that's what Carson Wentz now has done the last couple of weeks. He threw to 8 different receivers this past week. And that just shows that he is not just locking onto one guy. He's making his progressions. He's picking the guy who's open. And that tells me a lot as to the progression of him as a quarterback. Obviously, he had another game with multiple touchdown passes, which is huge. That brings him up to 13 on the season. It took him till week 14 last year to get to 13 touchdown passes. So that tells me a lot in terms of where he's come. Going back to last season, the last 2 weeks of last season, he's now gone 8 straight games with a touchdown pass. So he's really starting to develop some momentum, and we're really seeing, I think, an elite quarterback grow before our eyes, and it's really exciting to see possibly where he can go now that he's reached a higher level of where he's playing the game. My number 5 stud of the week is going to be Doug Peterson. Once again, I think the game was well coached. It worked out for them, but the one thing that I sort of wasn't really sure about was taking points off the board and going for 2. The only reason I'm not going to completely criticize that decision is a couple of things. First of all, the play they ran was easily successful, so I'm guessing that they probably had a play that they knew that they could use against this defense that would work, especially when you take into the fact that Luke Kuechly was out of the game at that point. So I think it might have been one of those situations where Doug Peterson knew he had a play that was going to work, and if that's the case, then you really can't criticize him. But without knowing that for sure, I really have to question, you usually don't take points off the board, and if that had not worked, I think we'd really be killing him today, because that really would have changed the end of that game entirely, because then now, instead of a 5-point lead, you've only got a 3-point lead, and suddenly them going for a field goal at the end of the game is only to tie the game, and it really would have, I think, made things a lot different at the end of the game had they not made that 2-point conversion. So for that reason, I'm going to put him a little further down on this list than maybe what I normally would have put him for that questionable call, but I'm not going to completely kill him for it if he knew he had a play that was going to work. My number 4 stud of the week is going to be Patrick Robinson. He came up with the huge interception to start the second half. And that interception was really amazing. I mean, he had to react with hardly any time and catch that ball. And that was one of those things that it was a gift. It certainly wasn't Cam Newton's fault, but it was one of those things that when the ball just sort of drops in your lap like that, coming up with that pick was huge. And it was after that, and then we go in and score that touchdown, and that's when we go for the 2-pointer, that I really thought, hey, we have a real shot at winning this game. Anybody who watched my prediction video know that I thought the Eagles might keep it close, but I thought we were going to lose. After that possession, I really started thinking, hey, the Eagles really are playing well. They really have a chance to win this game the way this thing is going. And Patrick Robinson was a big reason for that. He also came up with the huge recovery on the muff punt by Barner, which, mitigated a huge potential disaster there. So all in all, Patrick Robinson, I think, played a great game. My number 3 stud of the week is going to be Fletcher Cox. He's the one that led to the first turnover with hitting Cam Newton's arm and causing the first interception. And it just goes to show what a huge difference he makes. We had played before this game. We had played 2.5 games without him. They really didn't miss him in the Cardinals game, but the second half of the Giants game and the Chargers game, they really missed him, and it was clear that they missed him. So for, just the difference that he made in the line there and how much he changes the way that defensive line plays and how they have to block some of the other guys who've had really good seasons this year. I think Fletcher Cox is really showing again why he's one of the elite defensive tackles in the league. And for that reason, he makes my studs list as well. If you're noticing a trend here with my studs, it's going to continue with number 2, and that's going to be Jim Schwartz. I've killed Jim Schwartz lots of times for the way he's played his defense, but you really can't criticize him for the way his team played defense this week or last week. They played a solid game. The defense really won that game. I mean, the offense was good, but the defense really did a great job. I mean, when you basically completely shut down their running game, and the running stats were really misleading because the bulk of those were Cam Newton. They held their running backs to single digits in yardage, which is just absolutely insane. This team has really gotten to the point where it is an elite run defense team. It's going to be really hard for teams to run against this team, which is really big when you get into the playoffs, when you need big stops late in games. I think it really goes to show how this team has really played well against the run, and Jim Schwartz is a big credit to that. I also mentioned Fletcher Cox earlier. He's another reason, and I really think that this team can really become one of the elite teams as it relates to defense. And if we can get our secondary healthy, I think it can really become an elite defensive unit as a whole. For my number 1 stud, I really have to give it to the 2 linebackers together who just played a phenomenal game, and that's Nigel Bradham and Michael Kendricks. They really just blew me away with how well they played. They were flocking to every ball. They made huge tackles when we needed it. The big play that Nigel Bradham made right at the end of the first half, keeping Cam Newton from getting out of bounds and really getting them into a situation where they couldn't try a field goal that they probably actually should have tried. But as a whole, that linebacking core just played so well. They tackled so well. And I just want to take a moment to talk about, in generally, the way our tackling has been this season as a whole. And this season as a whole, this team has been tackling really well. There's been times I have criticized the Eagles for their poor tackling, and this has not been a problem this year. I don't know if the team specifically worked on that, but there's something that's clearly different about this team this year with tackling. And for that, really, I've got to applaud them because when guys get in open space, they've been able to bring people down for the most part, and they're swarming to the ball and making tackles. And I think it's really just sort of elevated where this team is as it relates to the defense as a whole, and where, how well they're playing, especially when you talk about the run defense I spoke of earlier. It just really, I think, cements all of that when you're tackling as well as this team is. So those are my studs of the week, and I really, like I said, my hat's off to the Eagles. Came out with a great win. But let's go ahead and turn our focus to the Redskins game. And when it comes to these divisional games, I think you can really put the statistical analysis aside and really just forget about that for a moment. The teams know each other so well that I don't think statistics really mean as much. The one stat that does jump out at me is the defense for both these teams against the run is good, which tells me that this game is probably going to be won on the quarterback play. And really, it comes down to, many times in the quarterback play, it comes down to limiting mistakes. And if you look at the game that we had against them in week 1, that's absolutely was the difference in this game. We won the turnover battle in that game 4-2. Of the 6 turnovers in that game, 5 were committed by the quarterbacks. There was, we had 1 interception and a fumble. They had an interception and 2 fumbles by the quarterbacks. So there was only 1 other fumble by one of their players that accounts for that last turnover. But really, I think if you look at the way that the whole game played out, it became those mistakes that were really critical. So if we can limit those mistakes, and Carson Wentz is doing that really well the last few weeks, if we can limit those mistakes, I really don't see how we lose this game. I think we're the better team than the Redskins, and plus we're playing at home. So all of that tells me that the Eagles should be able to win this game rather easily, frankly. However, this is usually when the ceiling falls in for us as Eagles fans. Just when we think the team has gotten to a point where they're really good, that's usually when, a crack in their armor is shown and they just end up going downhill. Case in point, I said that last year the Eagles after 6 games were 4-2. Then over the next 8 games, they lost 7 of them. So, that really says a lot about what happened last year versus this year. And I think that's going to, how we react to this early season success, I think is going to be a real telling point for how good this team is. But I think it is a point to remember that lots of times when teams start getting good, sometimes they have letdowns, and that can even sometimes happen in a division game, despite the fact that you think that how could that happen in a division game. You couple that with the fact that the Redskins are coming into this game as a desperate team. If they want to win the division, they really need to win this game. They can't afford to go in and end up, basically being 3 games back of us. They would really have to play well down the stretch for them to catch us. The one thing that I saw that really I think underlines this point is someone pointed out that if we beat the Redskins in this game and then we go just 5-4 the rest of the season, the Redskins would have to go 9-1 to catch us. So that's really, I think, asking a lot. And that just sort of underscores just how important this game is for the Redskins. So I think the Redskins are going to be desperate in this game, and that is a reason to be concerned because lots of teams, football is such an emotional game that lots of times when teams are desperate, they play with more emotion. And I think sometimes that can lead to mistakes, but sometimes it can lead to just good football. And it's really a question. I don't really know how this Redskins team is going to react to this particular situation and the desperate situation that they find themselves in if they want to have a real shot at winning the division. So all of that does give me concern. The only thing that sort of makes me feel a little bit better about it is the fact that we said the same sort of thing about the Giants in week 3, the Chargers in week 4, the Cardinals in week 5. All of those teams were sort of desperate coming into those games, and we were able to win all those as well. So that's the only thing that makes me feel a little bit better. Ultimately, I think the Eagles are a good enough team that if they play their game and they limit their mistakes and they play good, solid football, I don't see how they're going to lose this game. I do think that the Redskins are going to play with a lot more emotion. I think this game is going to be close. I think it's going to be a 1-score game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I know some Eagles fans think this is going to be easy. I just don't see that. I think it's going to be a close one. For that reason, my prediction is going to be Eagles 23, Redskins 17. Let me know what you think, though. Leave your comments below. Give me your predictions. Let me know what you think of the game. Let me know what you thought of the Panthers game. If you think, my studs and duds are mixed up, are there more duds than I identified? Or do you think there were some guys that should have made my studs list that didn't? Leave your comment below. I'll go ahead and check in after the Redskins game. Until then, fly Eagles fly.